many months where I didn't pay myself or, had to work side jobs or whatever it is.
And it's nice to have the AI's help. It can help us figure that out.
It's kind of like backbreaking work. And even, if you're doing it yourself, it's hard. If you have an employee, there's a good chance they're not going to stick around because they hate doing it.
Well, we did used to make a bunch of videos together.
Yeah.
There was a time where I was buying microgreens from you.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. That was a good time. That was an exciting moment in my business. And like, hey, this new high-tech AI robotics microgreens farm just moved into Boulder. And I forget, maybe did you find me or I found you? You guys were kind of hunting for accounts. But I think we found each other at a Naturally Boulder event.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So at that time, we had an advisor of the company who was a former executive director of Naturally Boulder. And he invited us to one of the events that they were having. He wasn't the executive director at the time. He had stepped down like maybe 6 months before that.
Aaron Mensica. Strong last name. Aaron Mensica is great. Shout out Aaron Mensica.
Yeah. Yeah. He's originally from Naples, Florida. And he's been out in this area for quite a while, and super great guy. He does a lot of trainings. He might be someone you might want to have on here. He's really well connected in the natural foods world, especially, and he was advising us at that time on various matters. But he's really a great guy when it comes to like branding and just marketing, and really like specifically with like businesses related to conscious capitalism, I guess is the term that I think he uses. Just things that are related to like how do we make the world a better place in different ways through our businesses.
So he founded Naturally Boulder, I believe.
Oh, is that right?
I think so. Or
okay, I know he was involved very early on. So.
Or very
I don't know if he has the
on,
term co-founder or not. That's sometimes a touchy subject.
And Naturally Boulder is one of the main reasons that I came to Boulder, because a lot of people don't realize this. You do, but for those listening, Boulder is like the Silicon Valley of the natural products industry.
Oh yeah.
So I came here for the support, the mentorship, the community, the infrastructures that we have here. How did you find yourself in Boulder? Did you come for this community and you're just kind of lucked out?
So I originally grew up in Brooklyn, New York. So I grew up in Park Slope, Brooklyn, and my mom is originally from Germany. My dad's from the East Coast. He was born in Manhattan, and then he grew up all up and down the East Coast from New York, New Jersey, Florida, Virginia. They met in Spain in the 80s, and then they settled in New York eventually. But I grew up there, and then because
your parents met in Spain in the 80s.
Yeah.
Fun.
And so because we had that European connection, obviously, like I had spent a lot of time there as a kid, and I grew up speaking German. And so after high school, I moved to Germany for a year. I lived in Bonn, which is the former capital of West Germany, which is that's like why people would have heard of it for any reason. Because other than that, it's a pretty small town. It's probably about the size of Boulder. And then it's near Cologne, if that provides any sort of like reference.
I lived in Berlin for 3 months.
Oh, no way.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Loved that. And
Berlin is amazing.
Berlin's amazing. We're in relation to Berlin.
Pretty far.
Okay.
It's like closer to like Belgium and the Netherlands and like France.
How's your German today?
What's that?
How's your German today?
It's pretty good. I basically don't have an accent, which is sometimes a strange thing because a lot of when I speak to Germans, like they don't necessarily like realize that I'm like sort of a foreigner. Because technically I'm not. I have a passport and everything over there, but I don't have a lot of like the cultural like reference frame because I don't speak German on a regular basis, and I didn't grow up there. And sure, I've spent a lot of time there, but it's a different thing.
I think it'd be fun if we did a double date, because my girlfriend, she's fluent in French and very strong in German as well. She's always looking for a little kind of fun way to throw some German in.
Yeah, I spent a year in Germany. I was in Bonn for 9 months, and then Hamburg for 2 months, and did internships at different companies there. So I worked in renewable energy. I was at a company called Solar World, they manufacture solar panels.
What year was this?
This would have been 2012, I think. Yeah, maybe 2011. No, it was 2012, yeah. So right after I graduated high school, I took a gap year, moved to Germany for a year, worked at those different companies. And then after that, I came out here to Colorado, and I studied engineering at CU Boulder. So that's how I originally came out to Colorado. And the reason I even looked at CU was because I don't know, I went to this school where like, very like, it was a prep school. So it was like there were like a handful of kids going to like, Ivy League schools. Like we had a couple going to like Harvard and Yale and all that stuff. And it's like, I wasn't interested in that, but I ended up going to CU because my dad had a couple of clients out here. He's an entertainment lawyer. So he worked with a couple of filmmakers that were based out of Boulder. And so when we did a trip to visit a couple of schools to look at, I kind of fell in love with Boulder and the mountains and the vibe here, the type of people that you meet here. And so that's how I ended up here. And after studying at CU, I eventually started my first company, which was called Hydrobot. And we developed basically hydroponic control systems that allowed people in like a small setting, like growing at home, to control the pH and the nutrients of the system, along with like turning pumps on and off on like a regular schedule or based on some sort of sensor feedback.
And what happened to, would you call it a Hydrobot?
Yeah, we decided to close it down. We did all right. I mean, we ran a successful Kickstarter campaign where we sold about $10,000 worth of product. Through the lifetime of the company, we sold like $15,000 worth of these little machines. But we decided we wanted to do something like bigger ultimately and like more impactful from like a sustainability perspective on the planet, like globally. And we were like, hydroponics is great. Doing it at home is nice, but is that really going to like move the needle in terms of like sustainability, and how do we actually create a world where our food systems are like truly sustainable in the sense of like, water, energy, the nutrients, like, all of these different things and the way that they impact the environment. That's really what got us excited about vertical farming.
Did any of that inspiration to make that kind of impact come from your time in Germany? I think Germany, I think like the best engineers. They definitely have that kind of like brand about them. Did Germany seed the engineering? Did Germany seed any of these bigger ideas?
Yeah, no, I think in some ways, not necessarily in a very direct way. When I was at Solar World, I worked in product management. So that was kind of like post-product development, like the product already exists, but like how do we essentially like make sure that we're continuing to be competitive with competitive products out on the market. And so that gave me some insight there. I'd say, just the high standards that they have over there are definitely like something that we try to, continue to hold up within our company. And one of my other co-founders is also ancestrally German as well. So we're not technically like German engineers, but sort of.
I've gotten lucky to have a peek behind the scenes for, I don't know, maybe like a year. I was visiting and seeing your production from microgreens farm now to, what would you say the space is mostly used for?
At this point, it's assembly of machines. So we pivoted. We were operating our own farm, and we did that for a while. Obviously, you were one of our customers, and
I wanted to stay a customer. I'm like, get success. I wanted you guys to crush in that way, but I'm very excited for this direction you're going in now.
Yeah, no, I mean, we learned a lot, and it was a great experience. But I think overall, like one of the goals, and this was kind of a goal from the beginning, so it wasn't a true like. It wasn't a massive pivot in a sense, but one of the things that we were trying to do with that company and in that stage of the company was kind of look at the unit economics of growing these foods indoors and where can we move the needle? Where can we make this more and more cost effective? Because coming back to the sustainability stuff, at the end of the day, if we're not able to do this in a way where the unit economics are really attractive for the farmer, then it's not going to scale. And it's just kind of a cute thing where it's like, oh, this is great, this is sustainable. But if we can't do it on a massive scale because the unit economics are so much worse compared to doing it in an unsustainable way, then what are we doing? We're going to lose long term if we don't create those systems that allow for the more sustainable way to win because of economics rather than just because people are willing to pay slightly more because they like it or whatever. Because ultimately that doesn't scale, right?
So did you go in to Rooted Robotics with the hypothesis that the unit economics would work, and then you started doing it yourself? You started your own farm, and you then realized that, hey, this doesn't add up.
Yeah. When we started the company, we kind of looked at a lot of the vertical farming companies that were around at the time. And this was kind of right around the time where a lot of them had raised hundreds of millions of dollars. So we're talking about companies like Plenty, Bowery, Aero Farms, Calera.
Some that are no longer here.
Vertical Harvest. Yeah, no, a lot of them have struggled. And, there's a lot of reasons for that. But one of the reasons, at least part of our hypothesis, was that the labor costs were still very high. And even when they were automating at a high level, the automation itself was quite expensive. And so even if you pay that down over many years, the unit economics are still pretty tough when, you're selling a low margin thing, like especially like lettuce, like that's where a lot of these farms started. They're selling head lettuce. And if it costs, let's say 25 to 30 cents or maybe 40 cents if you're doing it outdoors per head at the farm level, and you're doing it indoors and it costs you $1. I'm kind of making these numbers up, but they're, ballpark. If it costs you more than double to do it indoors and you're not able to get that much of a premium because it's local and there's no pesticides and all these, sustainability reasons, like great. But again, that doesn't scale well. And that's kind of what we were looking at the time is that on one hand, you have farms where they're not integrating enough automation. On the other hand, you have these farms where they are automating, but the automation machinery itself is wildly expensive. We're talking like many millions of dollars for these facilities. Yeah, it just doesn't really pencil out at the end of the day.
And you want to do the automation because that's less labor costs, and there's still a lot of labor that maybe these companies weren't accounting for.
Yeah, for sure. And, that's kind of natural with any new industry, right? Vertical farming's only been around for like 15, 20 years, at least on a commercial scale. Greenhouses have been around quite a bit longer, especially in the Netherlands, and they're kind of the pioneers of this field. But if you look at these vertically stacked systems where you have shelves full of greens, like 30, 40 feet high, getting in and out of the space itself, like moving the plants in and out, it can be quite a challenge. If you're going to automate that, it can be very expensive. If you're not automating it, it's expensive to pay people to go up on scissor lifts all day. And so there's a number of challenges in the industry that ultimately just there hadn't been that much time for products to really be fully developed. And I think part of that, a lot of what we saw at that point in the industry was that there was a lot of basically people being really secretive. They had raised hundreds of millions of dollars, and part of that is like telling investors like, oh, like the technology that we're going to develop for our own farm is going to give us this huge advantage over everyone else. And you look behind the curtain and they're kind of doing the same thing. And at the end of the day, because there wasn't that much collaboration, they're also making the same mistakes. They're also spending a lot of money paying engineers to make the same mistakes, and they're not talking to each other, which ultimately led to a lot of struggle.
Who's giving them all this money? It's surprising that so much money went into it and it just failed in such a massive way.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of venture capitalist firms, in particular.
What do you think they were being sold? That they could get the head of lettuce down to be competitive with field lettuce?
Yeah, and that's kind of the long term vision of this whole industry that I think still holds true, but it's just gonna take a while. Is the idea that climate is going to continue to change and shift in different ways, and there's going to be more and less water in different regions, and ultimately that growing food outdoors is going to be more and more expensive because of the unpredictability of it, right? So if we look at lettuce production, for example, most of it is happening in the Salinas Valley in California in the warmer months, and then in the winter most of that production shifts to where is it? It's Yuma, Arizona, and they're at least thereabouts, right? So both of these regions, they have particular climate vulnerability, if you will, if we want to use words that are maybe less politically charged than climate change or something, right? But if we look at those areas, they both have issues with salt, of all things, right? So in Yuma, Arizona, because there's limited water available, because the Colorado River is getting lower and lower every year, and we're in multi-year droughts at this point. Because of that, you don't end up being able to drain a lot of the salt from the fertilizers that they put down every year. And so they end up with buildup of salt in the soils, and that's going to make it harder and harder. And obviously having less water in general is just going to make it hard. And then in California, for a different reason you have salts in the soil, because they're very close to the ocean. And so the aquifer that they're drawing from, the groundwater that they're pulling from, is basically connected to the ocean in some parts. When the well gets when the aquifer water gets very low, the ocean water infiltrates to some degree, and so that water becomes salty, and then they're irrigating the fields with that and causes problems long term. That's very specific, but these kinds of things are happening all over the place, and different crops are affected in different ways. And so if you look very specifically at certain crops, like some will make a lot more economic sense, but the long-term vision of the whole industry is like, if we look 100 years into the future and it's really hard to grow like hardly anything outdoors, we need to have a backup plan. We can't just let people starve and like en masse, right?
Yeah. So the need maybe isn't so strong right now. The technology isn't fully to a spot to where it can compete. Indoor farming, hydroponic farming, not as competitive with field farming, but looking out, the need is definitely going to be there. So let's get good at it now, because we're gonna need it, because climate is continuing to change, our environment is changing, all of these factors hurting our ability to grow things outside.
Yeah. And I think that's what's so compelling, and I think that's a big part of the story that was being told. And I don't think it's not an untrue story. I think the promises that were being made about like how far along the technology was and how good the unit economics were, that's where I think people fell short. But the overall story of it is still, long term, it's absolutely something that we should still continue to invest in, because again, we can't just like let people starve. There's always a positive side and there's a negative reason to do things, right? And this is the negative one. The positive side is, there's all these health benefits. We can move food production closer to where, people live, and that because of that, the food is far fresher, and, people are able to eat it closer to the point of consumption.
Less herbicides, pesticides, fertilizers needed if you're all indoors. That's a big thing that I say for the microgreens. Absolutely. The microgreens that you were growing for me at one point. It's like right. You just clean water, a little bit of maybe what else were you putting something in the water? Some type of a fertilizer?
Yeah, we had fertilizers in there, and so they're basically just dissolved fertilizers so that the plant can absorb them directly, and that's essentially how hydroponics works. Is instead of the plant kind of pulling that from the soil, it's directly in the water, and that's what happens in soil. Is when you water it, some of those salts or nutrients in the soil will, become soluble in the water, and then the plant will suck that up. So it's kind of just like shifting how that works a little bit, but at the end of the day, the
and it's all natural.
Yeah, it's very natural. There's a lot of aquatic ecosystems that function like this anyway. It's not something that like humans created.
And so then the big benefit is, in terms of cleanliness, no need for herbicides, which are for weeds, because no weeds right. getting into a building, and then no pesticides for like bugs and things like that, because you're right. controlling the space for those as well. So you need to spray it with additional things.
Yeah, and because you're recirculating the water, you can get, on average, most of these farms will see like 90% less water compared to outdoors. You can get as high as like 99% if you're recapturing basically the water that the plants are transpiring or evaporating.
So what would you say the current state of farming is in the U.S.? Like, are we in this shift away from the field farming? Is that happening? Give us some type of an idea of like where we're at today.
Yeah, so it's very crop dependent when you talk about this. Like if we look at like wheat farming or something like that, very far away from that ever making sense indoors, because it's just so economical and so affordable to do that in an outdoor setting.
So like big crops.
Yeah, like any sort of like grain crop, wheat, soybeans, potatoes, corn, anything like that, like all outdoors will be for a very long time. And then if we look at specialty crops, which is kind of like what the USDA calls it essentially, but specialty crops is essentially like leafy greens, herbs. It can also include some fruits as well. But for the indoor side of the industry, like where we're at, in terms of like which crops are economically viable. Microgreens is kind of the top of the list in terms of like unit economics.
And is that why you started with microgreens?
Yeah, because we initially were actually working on lettuce and kind of had the same assumptions as everyone else, and then we realized like this is it's really difficult to make it work. And microgreens grow so quickly, so because of that, you can do a lot of crop turns in a year. So if you know, for radish microgreens, for example, they take about a week under light, maybe 2 or 3 days in the darkness, but on the shelf where they're spaced out more, I don't know, there's just more space between them, right? They take up more space when they're there versus when they're in the germination chamber. You can just kind of stack them. But once they're under light, it's only about a week. And so in a year, you theoretically could do like 52 crop turns versus like, even with very fast growing lettuce, you're probably looking at, you know, once a month. If you're doing whole like head lettuce, if you're doing like, you know, baby greens, probably 3 weeks. So anyway, so microgreens kind of top the list. A lot of leafy greens make sense, especially in greenhouse environments. You know, vertical farms are starting to get there in terms of like getting the cost down. The other thing, the other crops that really dominate are tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers are starting to come on, and a newer one that there's a lot of excitement around is strawberries. A lot of people doing those in greenhouses. There's also a great company called Oishi. They are founded by a Japanese guy. He has basically taken the knowledge that they've learned in Japan about growing these very specific types of strawberries that only grow in the, you know, some region. It's like some fancy thing, right? And he's basically like figured out how to grow those indoors. They've taken kind of the opposite approach from a lot of the vertical farms that started with lettuce, and they said this is a premium product, and because it's fruit, you can actually demand a higher price because, you know, better fruit is actually like noticeable versus like better lettuce is like, I mean, maybe, but there's a limit to like how much you can really like taste the difference of like a really high quality lettuce versus just like some generic lettuce.
Hey, I just wanted to jump in here and give a quick shout out to the sponsor of today's podcast, B Micro, the easiest way to sneak vegetables into any meal. Due to soil depletion, GMOs, and monocropping, Americans are not getting enough nutrients. So in 2018, I founded B Micro, the first freeze-dried microgreens company in the US to help Americans get more concentrated natural nutrients into their diet. Microgreens are a phase in the plant's life when they're 14 days old and naturally the most concentrated in vitamins, minerals, nutrients, all the good things that we need. Our microgreens are grown here in the US in soil in a greenhouse. They're certified USDA organic and regenerative organic. We grow, wash, and freeze dry them to extend their 1 week shelf life to over 1 year, allowing us to ship anywhere in the US without the worry of spoilage. We have 2 flavors, broccoli, backed by over 2,000 studies on sulforaphane and its powerful detox benefits, and a blend of red cabbage, radish, and broccoli, the most potent detox formula we've tested, offering you the most bang for your buck. Easily sneak these microgreens in any meal. Eggs, smoothies, pizza, pasta, even your kids' mac and cheese, you can't even taste it. Use code Steve15 to save at bmicro.farm.
Have you seen the videos going around with Irwan, which is the retailer in, I think, mostly California, where they're selling, I think it's a $20 strawberry. You can buy just one strawberry. It's like in a little glass case.
Okay. I haven't specifically seen that, but that's essentially the same approach that they take at Oishi. And so they sell like a little tin of, I don't know, it's like maybe like 10 strawberries for like $20. And it used to be like 50. So like they've brought the cost down quite a bit over the last like 5-10 years. And they're implementing a bunch of robotics. Actually just acquired a company in Denver that does strawberry picking robotics. And but yeah, they kind of took the different approach, and strawberries are getting a lot of excitement in the space now. And it, you know, ultimately, I'm a little bit skeptical of the unit economics personally, because it does take quite a bit of time to just get to the point where you're actually producing fruit. And that's ultimately like how many crop turns can you do? Like how much revenue can you bring in over a certain period of time?
So there's some companies are going after microgreens, leafy greens, and some different types of fruits. What would you say the state of field farming is? Is that what it's called? Is there innovation money? Is the government moving in to subsidize and support that? Any insights into what that, you know, traditional farming is going through right now?
Yeah, I mean,
and the ownership around it.
I have less insight into it because I don't work in that industry directly, but I talk to a lot of people there. You know, I think a lot of the things that I hear are around how can we be more and more efficient with our water. So I have a friend based out of the UK who's working on a project in Morocco where they're basically like turning desert land into farmland using these different ways of conserving water. And I can't get into it because it's his secret technology, but that's kind of something that I've seen trends around, is just because the availability of water is a big topic for the future, and just where is that going to shift to? Because that's essentially like the biggest impact that we see with climate change is ultimately like some places are going to be under more droughts and some places are going to be really wet, and dealing with that for different types of agriculture is a huge topic. And how do we create technology that essentially just like allows us to continue to grow these crops? And crop genetics, I think, is another place where we're also seeing that, right? Where people are kind of moving into like, how do we make these crops more drought resistant, or how do we allow them to tolerate heat more or tolerate cold more?
And would that be considered GMOs?
In some cases, yes, but not in all cases. I mean, it depends on like how they're doing the genetics itself. If they're doing it like through like gene editing versus if they're just like doing like normal breeding, like we've done for thousands of years, where you're just kind of like, oh, this one did well in this environment, so we'll breed that one with this other one that also did well. And
yeah, what's your opinion on GMOs?
I think it's a technology like any others. I mean, I think it can be negative. I think it depends on what are you modifying it to do, right? If we're modifying it to, be able to resist pesticides, and that means that they're going to spray more pesticide on the crop, it's not necessarily like the greatest thing for our health, obviously, right? I think that's probably non-controversial.
And that's kind of what they've done with wheat and corn.
Right, in the U.S. for sure, yeah.
With the glyphosates and
exactly,
and they make the corn like where it won't die when you spray the glyphosate on it.
Exactly.
And then the glyphosate is making us sick in all these wild ways.
Exactly. And then there's a bunch of glyphosate in the food. Yeah. It's a big surprise. Exactly. If you're modifying it in that way, that's probably not ideal for humans. And then obviously the nature adapts, and so you end up with these bugs that can handle the glyphosate too. And it's like, okay, well, now we're just like in this endless loop of this isn't actually helpful anymore, and we're just going to use more and more chemicals, and it doesn't make sense. Sure, they're not sustainable in like the obvious way, but even just in like, even if you don't consider like how it's harming the environment, they're not even like sustainable in the sense that nature will adapt to it and it won't even work anymore. It's not really the right approach from that perspective. We would need to research this. I don't know to what degree this would be harmful or not, but in principle, if all you're doing is like making a plant more able to tolerate heat because the weather's getting warmer, like great. If we can like produce more food at a more affordable price because of that, like great. But you do want to understand the downstream consequences of that. If that is that like affecting our health in any way, like we should study that. We shouldn't just like release these things out on the world and like hope it works, that it has been the approach. So
why do you think that's been the approach?
What's that?
Why do you think that's been the approach? Just because it's easy and doesn't cost anything to not study? It's
just the way things are regulated in the U.S. It's a very like reactionary approach versus like in Europe you see like kind of these more cautious approaches where it's like, all right, let's prove that it's safe, versus in the U.S. let's prove that it's dangerous or that it's harmful. And if it's not proven to be harmful, then the legal system like can't really stop them.
And now there's some new leadership in place, specifically with RFK as the head of Health and Human Services. Is there optimism in the space about him in there, or how's kind of what's like the professional opinion around in what he's been up to and what he might do?
Yeah, I don't know yet. I think there's still a lot of like unknowns. Like there's, I don't know, and not to pick on him, but in most politicians, like they say one thing and it's like, all right, well, let's see what happens. And I think that's kind of where we're at now is like, we heard that announcement, a week or so ago about how they're going to remove like food dyes and from certain products.
They give the companies, I think, unfortunately, like 2 to 3 years to do that. But like,
they have to figure out their process and how they're going to do it differently or whatever. Yeah. No, it makes sense from that perspective because you don't want to.
But a bunch of companies have already said, like, okay, even ahead of that, they're like, oh, we're doing it. So it does seem like a positive momentum in that way. But they've already figured out in Europe like kind of to your point, like the regulation's so much stronger.
Right.
I've seen these side by sides on Instagram of like our ketchup has got like 10 ingredients, and ketchup in Europe is just tomatoes.
Right.
It's like one ingredient. There's like our Fruit Loops have got 100 ingredients, all these processed fake things, and their Fruit Loops is like 3 ingredients, and it's nowhere near as bad.
Right. No, for sure. And you always like anecdotally hear those stories about like people who like have gluten intolerance, and then they go to Europe and they eat the bread and they're like fine. So I've heard plenty of people like say that. And
it must be so much less expensive to just process the heck out of it and use all this fake stuff. Because otherwise, why would they do it? They're like, why make two different types of
economics? Right. It's like if it makes more economic sense, it's like why they're doing it probably. But yeah, I mean it's short sighted. So I don't know. I think I mean coming back to RFK, I think it very much remains to be seen. I've seen. I'm hearing within the controlled environment agriculture spaces, which is kind of where we play, that's like greenhouses, it's vertical farms. Like there are more people like starting to lobby the government in our industry, and it's a very new industry. So like we're still figuring out how that works, but a lot of the like existing incentives for outdoor farming are not, in most cases, are not applicable to our industry. So we're not able to like take advantage of these tax credits or government incentives for various things in our part of the ag industry. And so hopefully that's something that shifts because the state of Virginia, for example, has had a lot of these incentives, and there's been a lot of companies in our space that have moved over there and doing great work out there. And hopefully that becomes kind of like a template for other states to follow. And yeah, Colorado, for example, like there's a lot of ag tech companies out here. So we have some connections. We got a grant through the state of Colorado, so we have some connections over there, and we're trying to like figure out what it would look like to start to build programs like that out here. And ultimately, like we want it to be an attractive business for people to become farmers, because that's one of the things that I think also comes up in a lot of these conversations is we've had this big shift away from, obviously like 100 years ago, 200 years ago, like vast majority of people are farmers, and now it's like less than 1%. And that's great in many ways. Not everyone wants to like toil all day, but at the same time, like it's also a good thing for young people to be involved in farming, because you have a lot of these farms where they're kind of like slowly dying because the younger generation just doesn't want to take over the business. They want to move into the city and do other things. So the more we can make it an attractive business opportunity, I think we can hold space for those people to be, the younger people, younger generations to come in and build businesses within this space. And, being able to do it in a greenhouse or an indoor setting also allows you to kind of have both of those. You can live in a city or maybe on the outskirts and run your business.
So say somebody's looking to get into entrepreneurship and into the farming space. Is there a recommendation around a way to get into it?
I think a lot of the lower barrier to entry businesses that we see out there are definitely on the microgreen side and definitely on the mushroom side. So we see a lot of people that are doing both of those. There's a couple of companies like that out here in Colorado. Mm-hmm. Both of those are things that theoretically you could start in your garage with like a few hundred square feet, right? And you've grown microgreens, right? You just set up a couple of those HDX shelves, right? Mm-hmm. The chrome shelves with
the wire racks.
The wire racks, that's the better term, yeah. So you just set one of those up and some lights and some irrigation. It's like relatively straightforward. A million YouTube videos that can show you how to do it, and that's relatively straightforward to just like start growing, like start figuring out the actual like operations of the process, and then eating it yourself. You don't even need to start by selling it. But as soon as you can, I would say like sell it to your friends or figure out how to sell at your farmer's market or sell to local restaurants. And, the same thing on the mushroom side, like figure out like the actual process before you're like promising people like product and before you know what you're doing.
Now, the way that you guys were growing at Rooted Robotics was like, tell me the cleanliness level. Like it was incredible because someone on your team, it connected into like just world-class how to keep it incredibly clean. Yeah. There's some thought for me around people growing things in a second bedroom with maybe like dirty carpet or animals going around or whatever. Like what's the cleanliness of in the mushroom and microgreen space in that kind of a way, because it's like which is, how would you describe the cleanliness of your space?
I mean, it was super high quality. I mean, had regular like cleaning schedules, and we weren't using soil, so that can also like eliminate some like vectors of disease and pests.
Concrete floor, like the whole thing was just really easy to clean, easy to see if anything's dirty.
And that's the like most important term there, right? Is easy to clean. Like when you're designing any of these spaces, every like surface needs to be easy to just like wipe down somehow.
Thoughts on people, start growing microgreens, start growing mushrooms, but how can people keep it really clean themselves at home?
Right.
Because I have sometimes concern around the microgreen space getting a bad name because somebody sells something that was, not clean, unclean microgreens, and then a bunch of people get sick from it. And that's happened to the sprouting industry many times. Sure. It's much easier for sprouts to get bacteria because of how they're grown. But then that's like killed the industry like a couple of times. There's entire chains that are like Jimmy John's, where I'm from, Chicago, and we've got a bunch of Jimmy John's. It's like they've killed all their sprouts. They're like, we'll never do sprouts again because and so it's like, I just don't want microgreens to get that kind of a name. So people out there being like, yeah, I want to get into microgreens. It's like, please do. We need more people in it. And it's like, it's got to be really clean because there's like no regulation around it. No one's coming and checking on a second bedroom microgreens farm. It's like, you could go sell that anywhere. Like maybe the retailers, maybe like a Whole Foods would be like, we got to see your operation, but most people are just like, yeah, whatever. These microgreens look good.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we do consulting to like help people with that. So if anyone's out there is like listening and super interested in this, like come reach out. But yeah, I think cleanliness is absolutely super important because again, it's just how do you create the space that's easy to wipe down like basically everything, right? And that's food safety is just like an important part of your brand. If people find out that your microgreens are getting people sick, like you're done. Your business is probably going to be over. And so, building those practices early on is just super critical. So I don't know. I could kind of like run down a laundry list of things. I think like, washing the trays between every cycle, like using some sort of sanitizer is super important.
And now you're creating systems to help people do that.
Those are the machines that we're building.
Yeah.
Right?
Tell us a little bit about that. What was like your first machine, your insight? Now you're pivoting from being a microgreens farm to now you're like, okay, this equipment that maybe you were making it for yourselves, for your own efficiency. Yeah. Let's start to tell us about that.
Yeah. So that's essentially what happened. We were building our farm. The plan was always to develop some sort of robotics systems, and one of the systems we developed didn't end up being all that practical, but it was one of the labor steps that we thought was really a big barrier in all of these farms was going in and out of the vertical racks. In a lot of cases, like they use a scissor lift or they have some rail system. We developed this system that basically was like one of those like cameras that float and
at like a football game.
Yeah, like soccer.
It looked so cool. I was like, this is wild.
Yeah, and that's kind of how we like really got talented at designing robotic systems and control systems and all of these things. And it was way more complicated than a lot of the stuff we're working on now. But it didn't end up being all that practical because you have to have like a very specific racking system that is compatible with our robot. And so what we're focused on now is really these like small and individual steps of the process, like planting the seeds, harvesting the crop, and washing the tray at the end of it. Those are things
very
that
labor intensive.
Yeah, exactly. So planting the seeds, I mean, a lot of people like they get like a salt shaker or something or maybe something with a little bigger holes so the seeds can actually fall through. But they basically take that and they shake it above one of these mats. Even if you're pretty fast, like 15, 20 seconds per tray. So if you're doing like many hundreds of these a week, it's that in itself is a decent amount of time, but it's also like going to be inconsistent. And so your yields are going to like not be like super regular because you might get too many seeds in this corner and not enough in the other.
And when too many seeds get in a spot, I know from my own farming, that's what creates a breeding ground for mold, bacteria, things like that, because not enough airflow is getting through.
Exactly. Yeah. So with our machines, you can like dial in like the density of like how many seeds you're getting. And we have different rollers basically. So the way that machine works is you pour your seeds into a hopper. There's a roller at the bottom that has these kind of like little divots. The seeds like fall into those pockets, and as it rotates, they fall onto the tray in like an even distribution. And so,
because for microgreens or for just plants, the seeds look a million different ways.
yeah, exactly. They're different sizes. They can be as big as like a pea seed. Those are relatively large. A basil seed is like tiny.
A little speck.
And so, yeah, we have different rollers for that. It's actually, we thought it would be like one of the simpler machines to develop. It ends up being like the most complicated machine.
Because of the different seed sizes, or?
Yeah, there's just so much variance in ultimately like what the customers need. So what do the farmers need? Like some people like are doing twice as many seeds on a tray compared to other people. And like we didn't, that's not something we realized until we had, hundreds of these conversations.
What are your thoughts on that, putting twice as many? Do you have a recommendation now?
Yeah, I mean, we do have recommendations like based on Eric, my co-founder's experience. He not only worked at our farm, but he's worked at a number of other farms doing microgreens for almost 15 years. And yeah, we have recommendations for what we recommend, but we've seen people do twice as much. They generally just don't grow them as long. And so they're just a younger crop. And because of that, they're not getting like crowded out too much because they're small.
So it could be a faster turnover with a similar yield?
Right. Yeah. And again, it's like, what does the customer want? Because in some cases, I don't know to what degree you've experienced this when did you ran your own microgreen farm at one point?
Yeah. Just out of a 2-car garage though.
Right. But like some chefs are like, I want it to be like this high. Like I want the plant to be like 2 inches and then another one will want it like 3 inches or 1.5. And it's like, to what degree like can you really like accommodate all of those things, especially at scale? I mean, when you're small, like, okay, but pumping these things out.
So for those unfamiliar with microgreens, how do you describe them?
I'd say it's basically kind of somewhere between, it's older than a sprout and it's younger than a baby green. I don't know. There probably is some sort of like, botanical, like, I don't know, what's the word, cotyledon?
Yeah.
Cotyledon?
So when the first leaves.
The first true leaves.
Yeah.
Right.
For my kind of time-wise, sprouts are 2 to 4 days old. People are familiar with those because they're grown in like a mason jar.
Right.
And that's why they can be a little bit of a bacterial breeding ground, because if your mason jar or your seeds or your
like a humid,
water
warm
isn't
environment.
Yeah, if it's not like constantly being cleaned or cleaned to start, it's like, oh, everything wants to grow in that. And then typically grown in the dark. Microgreens 10 to 14 days old, I think on average.
Sure.
Some a little bit faster, like a radish.
Right.
And those are grown in some type of a growing medium, hydroponically, which just means without soil or in soil. And then they're grown in the sun or under light. So they're going through photosynthesis or taking in chlorophyll. You're getting different nutrients that you get from that.
So it's not just like the nutrients that were in the seed that have like chemically transformed. It's also like, using the light and nutrients and all that to synthesize itself.
Yeah, and it's when the plant is still like very soft, so you could eat the whole thing, the stem. Right. And from my understanding, it's when the plant is naturally the most concentrated.
Okay.
In vitamins, minerals, nutrients. Some of them, we've done some tests. Sometimes it can be up to 10 times more stuff than in the sprout.
Right.
So microgreens to sprout. Sometimes some microgreens grown in there's so many variables, but it can be up to 10 times more nutritious than the sprout. Plus you're getting other unique things like chlorophyll because it's going through photosynthesis. And then compared to an adult plant like a
broccoli.
Yeah, like a broccoli is 40 to maybe even 100 times more nutrient dense. And it has very unique compounds in them at the microgreen stage that the adult plant just doesn't have anymore.
Right. Yeah. And then some of those properties are like really like healing properties for a lot of people. So I think that's like really the magic of these crops is like a lot of people like we just see them as like a garnish in a restaurant. But I think what would be really interesting to see in the future is people making like whole salads out of these. And obviously like you have a great product where you can add it to your smoothies and all of these different ways where it's just making it more convenient. Because I think, it's such a powerful food that really can like level up our health. And there's all these like different green powders and all these things out there, but I think microgreens are like, they're really special because ultimately it's this perfect like phase in the crop, like you were saying, right? It's more nutritious than a sprout. It's way more nutritious than the adult plant, and you're not just getting the benefits of the nutrients that were like embedded in the seed like you would with a sprout, but you're also getting like, that like young energy of the baby plant, basically.
Yeah, there's a vibrancy to it. Now, I'm
Right.
sure you were eating a lot of fresh microgreens when you had them around. Did you have a favorite? Was there one that you felt like your body was like, yeah, I want more of that?
I'd say from the flavor perspective, like I love arugula, and that was like my favorite from like just kind of like how it tastes. But I really like the broccoli and the radish as well, just in terms of like how they make me feel. And those are some of the ones that you do. So I think that's, there's not really much of a coincidence there because you know what you're doing, and you pick the right, not the only ones, but those were my favorite. They made me feel really healthy when I ate a lot of those.
And did you try much of the red cabbage?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That one is, the seeds were sometimes hard to come by, but that one was also really great. I think the flavor, I also didn't mind. I like regular like big cabbage too. So I think it was just like it was a good one. And similarly to the other ones, it also just like had a noticeable like improvement in like just like how I feel, like how my brain works and all of that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all of the cruciferous family, so broccoli, radish, cabbage, all in that way. And then we've done lab tests, and the red cabbage is the most potent in these really unique benefits that we're after, mostly detoxifying. They're really powerful at helping the body to create its own antioxidants to,
Right.
Good for pulling out bad stuff. The red cabbage was 2 to 3 times more potent than the broccoli. And broccoli is like got the best PR in the market. Like everyone's like broccoli microgreens, and I'm a fan of broccoli microgreens as well. And broccoli is actually a man-made vegetable that started as cabbage and a bad tasting cabbage, and then I think in Italy, like a couple hundred years ago, was bred with this other plant that then became broccoli. Now you can find tons of different types of broccoli at the grocery store, but broccoli is originally cabbage.
That's so cool. I wish there was a podcast that just talked about like the kind of histories of different plants, because I've always, I don't know, maybe it's kind of nerdy, but I've always found that like super fascinating. Like, where do these plants come from? Because the vast majority of the plants that we eat on a regular basis like are not something that existed 1,000 years ago, or maybe more like 10,000 years ago, because humans have been doing this for a while. But yeah, I mean, like bananas or like corn is probably like a great example. That's like more of a well-known story, like where it's like you look at the ancestor of like the corns that we eat today, and it's like unrecognizable. It's like this tiny little, it almost looks like wheat. And now they've like made the kernels like
they're so good too. It's like, oh man, are they good?
Yeah.
Well, I try not to eat a lot of corn because some people have gotten like carbon tested. There was a test out there that like was just testing people, and they're like, people are mostly corn. Like, well, that's like, I'm trying not to eat anything that eats corn, and I try not to eat corn because I'm like, I got enough.
There's
corn.
also a big difference between like processed corn, like sweet corn that you get at the farmer's market, or I don't know. But yeah, I think the processed stuff is obviously like not so great, but I don't know, sweet corn just like straight off the cob, like you can eat that
Unbeatable.
stuff raw. I didn't even know you could do that until I was like mid-20s. Just like had a friend from Nebraska, and he would just like go to the farmer's market and just eat it like straight up, like nothing on it, and it's actually really good if it's good corn.
Now, do you ever go to the Boulder Farmers Market here?
Yeah.
What do you like to get there?
I mean, I live in Longmont, so I go up there a little more often, but yeah.
A lot of the same vendors owned by the same company.
One of the Ibrahim Ayad is he sells microgreens in Boulder, so
Simply Fresh.
Yeah,
Shout out Ibrahim.
Yeah, shout out to Ibrahim.
Him and his family, phenomenal, first class.
No, good people. And then Kelly Jean is up in Longmont at the farmers market, so she does the microgreens up there. And then there's a lot of great farms. There's one, I don't know the name of it, unfortunately. Shout out to them, but there's a farm in Longmont. They have a booth where you just fill up a bag for like $10, and you just put whatever you want in there, and it's a good deal.
That's a good deal.
Yeah, and they have all sorts of stuff. They have tomatoes, peppers, onions, potatoes.
Oh, sure.
lean-
You can't put microgreens in it though.
No, that would
Okay.
the
That'd
unit
be
economics
wild.
of that
That'd be
doesn't work out,
wild. I'm like,
unfortunately.
dude, let's go right now.
Right? Yeah, no, they have more traditional veggies in that space. Yeah, no, but it's a good deal, and I enjoy that place. And there's also a lot of good, just like prepared food vendors in both of those.
Love the farmers market. I've probably worked over 200-300 markets, so it's really fun to be a guest just walking through, and I really appreciate it. And
It's hard work.
yeah, it is. The setup, the takedown, long days, but it's good. It's good for connecting into the community, getting instant feedback on products. And so much magic shows up when you just throw yourself out there and, you know, a couple hundred people walk by you. There's definitely going to be some magic. Every time I'm surprised by the magic that shows up when I just put myself out there.
Yeah.
So back to kind of the current state of farming today. On the hydroponic side, where are we starting to win? What companies are starting to? You just listed a whole bunch of companies that had kind of like failed at the beginning, that famously backed with huge sums of money and huge entrepreneurs like Jeff Bezos backed plenty. Where are we starting to communicate now amongst these companies? Have we kind of learned that lesson, and not a bunch of billion-dollar companies all make the same mistake, or what's going on?
It depends on where you look in the industry, but if we focus on kind of the customer base that we have, like we've seen a lot of more successful projects in the indoor vertical side that are smaller, mid-size operations, and you just don't hear about them as much because they don't have marketing teams and PR teams and all of that. But we've seen a lot more success at that level, and there's a lot of reasons for that, but one very obvious reason is just when you're not producing insane amounts of food, it's easier to sell out. It's easier to actually sell everything. And a lot of these big farms, they didn't sell all their products, so they struggled. But for these smaller operations, they're able to do a really good job of supplying it to their community, and that's kind of where we've seen a lot of success. On the greenhouse side of things, there's a lot of really great leafy greens operations that are continuing to scale. Little Leaf Farms they're in Massachusetts, or just in New England in general, and Good Leaf Farm, I believe they're in Canada. And then on the tomato side, this isn't anything new. They've been dominating this space for a long time, but there's a company called Sunset that you probably see in every grocery store. Master Nardi is the name of the family, and they've kind of cracked the code, and there's this area of Ontario called Leamington, and my understanding, everyone take this with a grain of salt because I wasn't involved at this time, but I've heard the story that basically the ketchup, Heinz ketchup, was looking for a large supplier of tomatoes. This is probably 50 years ago or something. And they ended up setting up a bunch of these farms in Leamington, Ontario. And so I think they continue to supply a lot of that, but they continue to grow and grow and grow. And because of them all being in a similar area, they just got really good at it. And there's also, maybe this will change with all the chaos with the trade wars, but there was also a big advantage of doing things in Canada and then shipping them over the border, where their dollar was a little bit weaker, and so even if you're getting $15 an hour as a day laborer in Canada, that might be more $13 or $10 down here. So the currency kind of also played a big factor in them being able to have that advantage for a while. They're certainly not the only place where tomatoes are grown. There's a lot done in Mexico as well. Florida has a big outdoor industry as well. It's obviously seasonal, but yeah, I think it's somewhere north of 80% of tomatoes in the U.S. are grown in greenhouses, and so it's at this point it's a well-established thing, and the unit economics really make sense.
What percentage of farmers are in the small to medium range versus the large?
It's this often gets overlooked, but it's somewhere around 90%. And
90%?
Yeah.
Is that by number of farms?
Number of farms, not by how much they produce, and that's I think where there's a fair distinction there to make, because the larger farms tend to dominate in terms of volume, but obviously there's fewer of them because they're doing so much. But that is like it's a critical piece to what we focus on at Rooted Robotics, because we have so many of these small farms, and from our experience running one of these small farms, it was an underserved part of the market. And when it comes to like machinery and automation, because it's like you go out to find some piece of machinery for your farm that just does like one part of the process, and you're looking at like 50 to 100 grand, and you have 10 other processes that theoretically could be automated. So it's never gonna, if your revenue for the whole year is like 150 or 300 grand, it doesn't make any sense to spend like 100 grand on a piece of machinery. And so, especially if that piece of machinery is only going to save you like 10 grand a year, right? If it saves you 50, then great, do it. I mean, get financing, whatever, figure it out. But like, if it's going to save you very little because you're not operating at scale, of course it doesn't make sense. And so that's kind of what we're focused on at Rooted Robotics, is like we have these machines, sell them between $7,000 and $15,000 for that market. We're starting to work on more expensive machines for other markets, but for the microgreens market, like we have these machines that are much more affordable. And because of that, it's kind of opened up this world of automation to like many, thousands of these smaller operations who they might not dominate when it comes to like the overall production and output in the entire market, but there are hundreds of them, if not thousands. And so, for us, it's a big enough market to go after. And what we've seen is a lot of the competitors that we have in the space are mostly based in Europe. And in Europe, you don't see as many of these smaller operations. In the Netherlands, for example, like they pretty much only have like larger operations, and they're not that large, but they're all like greenhouses, and they've been doing it for almost 100 years at this point. So they figured out the economies of scale, and at a certain point, it's just like it's very difficult to compete if you're a small operation. So,
is Netherlands the leader in hydroponics and greenhouse growing?
Yeah, I'd say so. Absolutely.
And why do you think that is? Just because they've been doing it the longest?
Pretty much. I mean, they're very ingenious people. Their country is tiny, and they've like figured out how to do a lot with what they have. And they're just, I think a lot of, it's hard to say like exactly like why it ended up being there, but ultimately like the Dutch are, their half of their country is like essentially like below sea level, right? That's why it's called the Netherlands, right? They're lowlands. And so because of that, they've had to like develop a lot of like engineering skills around like building dams and like, controlling flows of waters in a different way, especially when it comes to agriculture. And so because of that, they've kind of evolved into like being a very like dominant force when it comes to like just knowing how to like engineer these types of systems. And then I do think there also are some energy reasons why. So they've essentially like had certain, they've like coupled energy production with greenhouses. So if you're producing energy like on site where the greenhouse is, it's quite a bit more affordable for that energy than it is if you have to like have like, hundreds or thousands of miles of power lines like running there.
I've seen images of the Netherlands greenhouses, and it's just like miles and miles of greenhouses. It's unbelievable. It looks like Mars. It's like, whoa, like that's what it would look like if we were growing like on Mars. It's like another world. It looks really sci-fi to me,
Yeah,
especially like the night photos.
Right. Yeah, and there's some areas of Spain similarly where they do like a ton of tomato production, all in greenhouses.
So now your products are around 7,000 to 15,000. Give people an idea of what products, like what your competition's pricing is, because it's pretty significantly different.
Yeah, sure. So our machines, like I'll just give an example. Our seeding machine, $7,000 starts there. We have add-ons, so you can have more features and price goes up a little bit. But similar machines that are out there on the market, like the lowest end is like hand tools. So we're talking about like things that are like a few $100s. They're not going to be as like consistent, and obviously they don't save as much time. And then on the other side, when it comes to like real like machinery and automation, we're looking at like the low end is probably somewhere around like 25,000 for that particular machine. You can easily go like into the hundreds of thousands. It's just like which level of automation do you need? Because again, if you're operating at a massive scale, there's certain things like the handoffs between each process that you definitely want to automate those. But if you're doing a few hundred trays a week, makes sense to just like walk back and forth between the machines a few times.
Now, how are you able to do it for so much less and maintain the quality? I mean, I've seen the machines. I've been there in person with them. I mean, the quality is, I would love anything built like that.
Yeah, thank you. There's a number of factors. I'd say, the big ones are going to be that we are using a kind of advanced manufacturing techniques that a lot of the other companies don't use, which is essentially like building the machines out of like, it's sheet metal, but it's like thick, right? So it's all of the components are basically laser cut and then bent, and then all we have to do is like kind of bolt things together. We've also developed a conveyor system that is dramatically lower cost compared to traditional conveyor belts. Our systems are basically just pushing the trays through with a paddle on a timing belt. Maybe this is a little technical, but we're basically pushing them through, and that gets our cost down about 10 times for that particular part of the machine, which is huge because a 4-foot conveyor, for example, could be like $4,000. And just the conveyor, like nothing on top of it, like not doing anything, just moving things for 4 feet. And for our system, that costs us like $300 to $400 for that same kind of system. And so that's a big part of it. We also use aluminum for most of our machines. It's lighter. It's a little more affordable. And then, I think the other one that gets overlooked sometimes is like the machines are small. Because of that, they're able to ship, and you don't need to do freight shipping. You can just do regular FedEx or whatever. I have no affiliation with FedEx, but yeah, you can ship them regularly, and they come pre-assembled, and all you have to do is like put it on a table, and they're ready to go. So there's no like installation cost. With a lot of these other machines, there's going to be like a $5,000 or $10,000 fee for them to like show up and like bolted everything in and like drill it into your concrete floor and like all of this stuff, and then they're going to spend like a day or two like training your team on how to use it. And it's like, for us, it's like put it on the table, watch a couple videos, and like you're good to go. And I think those are probably like the biggest ones that get overlooked. It's just like it's just easy to use the machine. It's relatively intuitive. Like we're happy to like get on calls with new customers and like train them on how to do it, but we can do that remotely, right? So we don't have to fly out to wherever they are.
So that's the seeder, and then you also have the harvester.
Yeah.
And what would you say most people purchase first? If they're looking to invest in one piece of equipment with you today, which one?
I would say it probably would be the washing machine, which we just started selling. Just from the perspective of like, I don't know how many of these 10, 20 trays you've washed by hand, but it's really painful, right?
Yeah, it's hard to do it in a good way.
Yeah, it's hard to do it.
It's really important, just like we were talking about with the sprouts, and if that mason jar is not clean, if your 10 by 20 tray is not clean, you're going to have an issue. And if it's connected into a whole hydroponic system, that issue, that mold, that bacteria could spread throughout the whole system potentially.
For sure. Yeah, and the washing machine, we're just in like the first iteration of it, so we're just started selling it. We're going to get feedback and improve them, but we have like however much sophistication you need. If all you want to do is just like pressure wash it down and like get rid of the physical debris, like great. But we're also building in a system where you can basically dry the tray and then spray a sanitizer on top of it so that it's like killing any sort of like molds or bacteria. And so that is a big pain point, not just for the reasons that you mentioned, but also just because it's kind of like backbreaking work. And even, if you're doing it yourself, it's hard. If you have an employee, there's a good chance they're not going to stick around because they hate doing it. And it's just like, it's not fun. Seeding is one of the ones where like you can see like big yield improvements and all of that, but seeding is also not that hard, and sometimes people enjoy it. I mean, it's kind of fun. Like, if you're doing it like 1,000 times a week, it's probably not that fun, but if you're doing it at a small scale, it can be fun. Mm-hmm. And then harvesting, I think harvesting would probably be number 2. So washing, harvesting is just, it's a more expensive machine. We sell them for $15,000. The nearest competitive one is probably like 45,000, 50,000 maybe. So it's a good, step cheaper or more affordable. than the other ones.
And in my mind, not cheap at all. The quality is
Yeah, that's why I say
phenomenal.
affordable.
Because of the way that you were saying that
Right.
you've made it. I mean, the thing is solid all the way through.
For sure, thank you. It's also really important for us that the machine's like easy to use, easy to clean. More importantly, because some of these, even some of the machines that are like in the $50,000 to like $100,000 range, like they take like an hour and a half to clean if it's one person, or if it's two people, it may be 45 minutes to half an hour. That's horrible. Like,
yeah, that's a lot, and it's messy.
You should just be able to wipe it down.
Yeah, it's hard to do it right. I remember seeing some of the first iterations on your harvesting machine before you had the safety guards on it, and you were tying different kind of like bandsaw blades on it.
Right.
And I was like, this thing looks like a horror machine. To help people understand like kind of the safety around it, and maybe how that machine actually works.
Yeah. So the way that it works is essentially you have your tray of microgreens. The plants are obviously all like growing in one direction. And so you just run them through a bandsaw. And as they get chopped off, they fall onto this piece of clean sheet metal. And then that whole thing is on an angle. And so because of the angle, it falls down using gravity into a bin. So we have a little shelf that attaches to the machine, and you just put your bin that you're harvesting into right there. And some of the things that we've improved on the ones that we're selling now is that in the earlier versions, you were kind of pushing the tray through with a push block. Mm-hmm. And we decided that getting there is a safe way to do that, but getting your hands anywhere near the blade is just not ideal. And so we figured out that we could use the same conveyor system that we're using on our seeding machine for that machine. And so basically you just set your tray down into the machine, and then it gets pushed through the blade, and you can completely step away. You don't have to be anywhere near the blade. And then we also have a safety guard. We have a big, like half-inch or maybe like quarter-inch thick piece of plastic that can withstand like probably 500 pounds of force without like bending or
so
whatever.
People aren't at risk of getting a harvesting machine and there's robotics built into it, and they're not going to get hurt from it.
Yeah, you would have to like intentionally like stick your hand into the blade.
You'd have to go crazy.
And I know that they have some of those like in some bandsaw systems like that they have a mechanism where if it detects it's touching your finger or something that it shuts off. Unfortunately, we can't deploy that technology because the way that it works, it would detect greens or mushrooms in the same way. Mm-hmm. And if we're cutting any of those things, like obviously it needs to stay on. So unfortunately we can't use that type of technology, but we have made it very safe in the sense that like you don't have to get anywhere near the blade. Even if you trip, if the floor is slippery near the machine, if you trip and your head like gets near the blade, there's all of these like plastic shields and stuff that are just going to make it very, very difficult for you to hurt yourself.
Now, how does it feel running this company, the more robotics, AI, selling machinery, equipment, versus when you were selling fresh microgreens?
I think it's a better fit for who we are as individuals. 3 out of 4 of my team are engineers, myself included. And, it's what we're best at, ultimately. It's something that, for me personally, like the whole reason I'm into this and doing any of these companies is that I care about creating technology that makes more sustainable solutions dominate in terms of like just being more economically productive or whatever, right? And so doing one farm is great, it's wonderful, but providing the technology to like hundreds or thousands of farms eventually is going to be, from my perspective, like something that for me personally is more impactful. I wouldn't like put that on everyone else, right? I think like each person needs to figure out like how they can help their community in the world, like, depending on who they are and their own skills. But for us and who we are, like selling these products rather than just like using them in our own facility is much more impactful.
Yeah, I was connecting with you the most when you were selling microgreens, fresh microgreens to me.
Right.
And so we were in a great connecting way and haven't connected just as much because I have no need for this equipment. Right. I knew about this equipment when I had even my 2-car garage microgreens farm. I was like, wow, phenomenal, especially the cleaning of the trays. It's like that really is demotivating. It was like the one thing I didn't want to do. I'm like, I will do my taxes 10 times before I want to clean all these trays again. This is crazy. To me, you seem lighter, brighter, like stronger, like just who you are. It feels like I'm like, oh, you guys are winning. Like you're getting some good clients, you're getting some good feedback, you're getting good sales. You're like, oh, this is, and there's such a huge need. Yeah. You're selling something for $15,000, and your nearest competition, quality and performance aside, is $45,000, $50,000. It's like a no-brainer. It's like, what a great spot to be in.
For sure. Yeah, no, it's been really fun. The last couple of months we've like had our best months, and like we're growing, and it's been great. Got to have a couple of like really interesting projects as well. Even though we generally focus on like the smaller farms for our off-the-shelf products, we're also working on some custom projects, and that's been really fun to just get into more and more sophisticated technology. Like and some of the what's fun about those projects too is that we can take a lot of what we learn in those projects and bring them into the standard off-the-shelf products and make them better and better over the years. So like one example of that is there's a harvesting project that we're bidding on where we would develop a harvesting machine that automatically adjusts the blade height. And so for this customer, they're growing in a cut and come again method, right? So where they cut the crop with the harvester and then they let it grow back. And so
like what type of crop can do that?
This would be like herbs mostly. A lot of crops like trying to think like
because microgreens you really can't do that.
No, because they're too young and they don't have enough like energy like stored within like the root system to like be able to like pop up again.
Yeah.
But yeah, so these are generally going to be herbs. Yeah, I'm not allowed to like get into like too much detail on like what they're doing, but because they're cutting, they need to basically cut at a very slightly higher height each cut because they don't want the like dead material from the previous cut to like get into the product because there's food safety
because each
issues.
time it grows back just not quite as tall.
Right, exactly. And so like that automatic blade height adjustment is something that like we'll be able to offer as like an add-on like for our regular machine in the future where it's like, all right, for an extra couple $1,000s, like you can have this feature where it's much easier to you just press a button and it goes up and down versus now it's it's not hard, but it does take like 5 minutes to like adjust the blade height. And that's not ideal.
What would you say your day-to-day looks like now?
I'm less involved in engineering. I'm still involved in like design meetings and stuff like that in the beginning of processes. And, I get to give my feedback, but I'm not doing like CAD design or writing code or anything like that these days. That at this point in the company, my role is related to fundraising and sales and marketing for the most part. So really like more on the business side of things. Right now we're raising a small seed round to really like get us a little more time and runway to bring a few more products to market that we think will do really well and get us to the point where we're able to like stand on our own 2 feet. And that's been a really good. It's going to been a good process. We're getting close to like finishing up that round. And
what have been some of the learnings with that on the fundraising?
I think a lot of it has to do with like how we're like presenting ourselves in our story and like what we do, because it's a very complicated business. It's very technical. There's a lot of people need to understand farming in many cases to like be able to understand what we do. Obviously, like on its face, it's like, okay, it's a manufacturing business. Like we make machines, we order parts, we put them together and we ship them out. Like on that face, it's like simple, but understanding like who the customer is and like why we think that market is going to grow is like very important for investors to understand. And so that's like learning how to tell that story in a way that's compelling it's definitely been good learning. And
what parts of that story do these investors seem to kind of like hook on to the most?
I think share some of it. Yeah, I mean, I think the stuff that I shared earlier about the Salinas Valley and in Yuma, Arizona, like specifically where it's like, regardless of like climate change globally, it's like, let's look at these places. This market is going to be like disrupted because they're not going to be able to produce the same amount of crop in those regions that they generally have. And they, we're talking like 95% of the lettuce is grown in these areas.
Oh, okay. I missed that part. Wow.
Yeah, I got it. I probably should have.
You might have said it.
No, I don't think I did.
Oh, but 95% of the lettuce in the U.S. is grown in where?
In those two regions, in the Salinas Valley and in Yuma, Arizona. It depends on what time of year.
And where's Salinas Valley again?
This is in the Central Valley in California.
Okay, so California and Arizona, these parts are growing 95% of the lettuce, and because less water, they have a lot less water available to them. That's going to be massively disrupted.
Right. Yeah, and salinity and heat, hot and cold changing. It's again like when I'm talking to investors, it's like I want to like simplify that story because I don't want to talk about the problem for 30 minutes. I want to talk about what we do and why we're superior and why we're going to grow and all of these things. But I think understanding why the industry will grow is really critical because we're selling to farmers. If there are less of those farmers because vertical farming isn't doing well, then it's not compelling. But we're not really focused on vertical farming in particular. We're focused on, just all of the different types of ways that people are growing successfully. And it doesn't have to be vertical. Some of it is, but we're seeing a lot more success in the greenhouse space. That's an important part of the story. And then, just really breaking down, like, how do we make money? Like, what are our margins? Like, all of those kind of like details are obviously also very important for them to understand. Like, how do we make money, and how are we going to like exit the company? So are we going to sell the company to one of those European competitors? Are there other companies that might be interested? So that's all part of it.
And what type of person or investor seems to be attracted to this the most?
We have a pretty like wide ranging group of people right now, so it's hard to like pin it down. I would say generally it's going to be people that really like there's the impact side of things, I think, on one hand, where people are really like focused on like, okay, this technology is actually going to make the more sustainable ways of growing more competitive from an economic perspective, and they really value that. Other people really focus on the economics of it and just that it makes sense. From the perspective of like the business makes sense, the business is going to be able to be like strong and healthy for many years, and that there is a market to sell the company to. So these other companies that aren't focusing on the same things that we are would be interested in purchasing it.
So when you look at greenhouse versus vertical farming, is there one that you're more optimistic on? I thought I heard you say that it seems like you're winning more with the greenhouses.
Yeah, I think greenhouses have a lot of advantages. Obviously, like the main one and the obvious one being that you don't have to pay for as much electricity for lighting. And most of them these days, at least the more advanced ones, like have supplemental lighting, but sunlight is free. And that makes a big difference. So it depends on the crop, I'd say, again, because if we're talking about like tomatoes, for example, the amount of light that it takes to like produce a tomato is like tremendous compared to like microgreens, where there are people that do it in greenhouses very successfully. He does it in greenhouse. They do a great job.
Yeah, world class. Grows in soil.
Yeah,
in a greenhouse.
You can't knock that method, but the economics of doing it indoors in the way that we used to, it also works out quite well. And so I'd say like overall, like it depends on the crop, but greenhouses just are, because they've been around much longer, there's just a lot more that you can do. We see a lot more businesses doing that ultimately because it's this kind of like established framework, and it's not as experimental as vertical is.
I think a lot. I originally thought most greenhouses had glass, like roof ceilings. Then learned that most of them are actually plastic because more of the sun's rays can get through these. It's probably like a very special kind of a plastic where the glass actually will reflect it.
Yeah, I don't know. It's not my
I just threw that at you to be like, all right, now teach us about that.
Yeah, sure. No, it's not my expertise. There's some people in Boulder that Series Greenhouse Solutions. They tell you all about that. It's not really my field, but I'm sure that there are like specific like wavelengths of the light that just like pass through the material a little bit.
Now, when it comes to you're doing robotics, there's also an AI component. At least when I was talking to you before, is there an AI kind of piece to all of this? What do the investors think of it? Where's Rooted Robotics with AI?
Yeah, so at this point, we're not incorporating AI directly into any of our products. We have a vision to build it in some ways, and like build a software layer on top of the machines so that people kind of have an interface where they can go in and control the machine and look at data that the machine itself is gathering. And gathering that data, like using computer vision and stuff like that, is going to involve some machine learning and AI. But at this point, for the most part, we use a lot of it internally. So just making our own business processes a little more efficient by, I'm starting to dabble with building AI agents internally. So just like very basic stuff where, it's like, okay, look at my calendar for today. Look at like, okay, let's say I have 3 meetings. Make a record that we have a meeting, like for each of these 3 meetings, make a record that happened, and then who was there and what company they're with and so on and so forth. And then also check, do each of the attendees exist in our CRM? If they don't exist, add them. And just having that happen so that I don't have to like go into the CRM and like type it in is like, that's the type of stuff we're using it for right now. It's like very boring at the end of the day, but it saves us a lot of time. And, it just helps a lot of these like processes like that, in any business are not the like fun, like sexy part of it, but they're important.
I'm not using any AI agents today. Is
Sure.
there one or two that you recommend I start putting time into first?
It really depends on what you're looking into automating. Like if you're talking about like process automation, like I'm referencing there, I would say there's a tool that called N8N, N8N. They basically, are you familiar with Zapier or Zapier? Okay, well,
I'm only familiar with ChatGPT.
okay, fair enough. Well, Zapier has been around for like before AI, so they're not like they do a lot of AI now.
Are they a connector?
Essentially,
Okay, I think I only.
it's sort of like it's like APIs, but like without having to program. So APIs like connect a piece of software to another, right? So Zapier would be like send I don't know. This is probably a terrible example, but let's say like send this piece of data from Gmail to Slack. Like just send me a message that I got an email from this person, and only like, and you can just set up like little automations like that where it's like when this happens, like do this.
What about around marketing? And both of us
Yeah.
spend most of our time sales, marketing, anything in that kind of way.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of. I haven't done it myself. I'm still like hesitant in some ways because some of these systems, like, if you're just like checking what it does and you're not just like letting it post blindly, like on your behalf, that's where I get a little worried. But if you're like checking on a regular basis, it can save a ton of time. But I have seen people build out workflows with this tool in N8N where they like basically like give it a prompt and it will like create all these marketing materials and like, put it in different formats for like the different types of social media that there are, do it in the style of like this particular influencer who's successful, and it'll sort of like auto generate a bunch of content for you. Yeah. Haven't experienced a lot of that, or haven't like used a lot of that myself, but a lot of the people that I follow on YouTube who make these systems, they'll like share that whole system. So you can just like download it and do it yourself. And in theory, I think it's very powerful. I think we're at the very beginning of this, obviously. So a lot of it's going to be like garbage, but
How do you see AI playing a part in the future of our food systems?
the biggest thing that I think is just going to be the ability to do more with the data that we have and that we can reasonably collect. So that's going to be a lot of different things. But ultimately, like, how can we use that data to grow our crops more effectively, to improve our yields, to improve the amount of nutrients in the crop, whatever it is you're trying to optimize for? I think that's what AI does best is just like take massive amounts of data and like figure out like find patterns within it. And sometimes it makes things up. Sometimes those patterns aren't real. Our own brains do that as well. But with enough research and testing, you could do a lot of that. And I think that also comes in on the robotic side, right? Where the machines that we're making now are just, they're relatively like simple processes where it's like, all right, put the thing through the blade. When we have these more like advanced humanoid systems that, can walk around and like see like a human sees and like pick things up like we do, that's also obviously going to like change things pretty dramatically. But I think it'll be a while, I think, before these things are very like reliable and consistent. A lot of the like demos that you might see like from Boston Dynamics or any of these like really big robotics firms, that's a demo at the end of the day. Like it's not necessarily able to do that like all day, every day for like for many years without like.
And some of it might
having an
be
issue.
actually remote controlled, and they make you
Right.
think like, oh, it's doing this on its own, but there's
Yeah.
somebody, yeah.
And if you have to like pay like an engineer, let's say they're making like, $80,000 or $100,000 a year, and they have to like be at your business, like taking care of this robot, it's like, all right, well, what are we doing? Like, to what degree is, unless if it's replacing the labor of like 5 people and now you just have like the one engineer, like, okay, maybe, but it's still not like quite there to where you can just like let them like run free and like they'll do everything perfectly. We're far away from that.
When you look out into the future, maybe it's 10, 20 years, what does farming look like? What's like the next big jump that will happen in farming? And when do you think that will happen?
Well, there's a number of ways it could go. Like, the way I hope it'll go, and that we'll be working towards like bending it this way, is that more and more food production will be able to be done locally, and increasing the amount of crops that can be grown in these controlled environments in an economic way that's actually effective. And because if we can grow more and more food locally, then the nutritional content and quality of that food is going to be better and better, because people are eating fresh food instead of something that's been processed or sitting on the shelf for 3 weeks or whatever it is. That's going to just make our societies like healthier from just the perspective of like, what are we putting in our bodies? And so at this point, like there's a limited amount of crops that are like really like suitable for that, just from the economics of it. But if we can expand that more and more, like that's, I think, where we want to head.
And what are these farms looking like? Is everything fully automated? It's just conveyor belts and these autonomous robots. Is it, and I don't know, a bunch of sensors and a couple engineers looking over it? Is the farmer kind of gone? And when you look out a little farther, what do you see?
Probably in some ways. I mean, I think the humans will probably be more involved on the business side of things. I think there'll be more and more that we can remove. In some ways it's like kind of dystopian, but I just think, like, I don't know.
It'll free up our time to do other things too.
Right. And that's kind of why I think automation is important at the end of the day. Is like, there's so much like drudgery in our lives, like where it's just like things that we don't like to do that we have to spend a lot of time doing, and they suck. And yeah, I mean, that's like part of the optimistic version of the future, where like AI allows us to like spend more of our time like with like leisure activities and just like spending time with family and friends, and like not having to like work like maniacs all the time. I don't know if it'll go that way, because you look at like 100 years ago, people thought that that's what was going to happen with the Industrial Revolution, and like it's like, no, we probably work. I mean, people don't work as physically hard as they used to, like, because they don't work in like factories, or at least in this country, right? But like in factories and like agriculture and all these things, like we have a lot more mechanization, so you don't need to be like a super strong person to like be able to get a bunch of work done. You just go on your laptop. It's really hard to say. I mean, I hope it goes that way, because I think the way that like economic distribution of just value and all of those things it's gonna be really hard to like control, like not having like all the money just go to whoever owns the AI systems. I think one thing I'm really optimistic about is a lot of the open source things that we've been seeing in the AI world, where you look at like the open source version of like ChatGPT, and it's like very good compared to like the closed source version. It's like not that far behind. And from my perspective, I think the way things are going to shift there is that I'm going to make a bold prediction and say that like software as like a business is going to be really, really tough. And it's going to, I think that industry is going to shrink dramatically.
Oh, really? Because the AI can just make it.
Yeah, because, if you look at what a lot of SaaS companies do, software as a service, a lot of what they do is essentially just take a bunch of information. It could be any type of information. It's in a database, and it's just displaying that to a human in some like way that's easier for us to understand. And then it's, doing a bunch of math on it or whatever it is, whether that's like accounting, whether that's like business processes, emails, whatever. All of these things, like if AI can just like make like a personalized app that's just for Steven or just for Max, and like knows everything about your business and your life, like I don't need to pay like Google like $12 a month and like pay like, I don't know, like HubSpot like $50 a month or whoever it is, right? Like I don't need that. I can just like have that all locally, and then effectively like all we're paying for is Because in this version of it, I'm saying that like an open source version of this is happening, right? So I don't even have to like pay for anything other than the electricity to run the computer that's doing all of this.
This podcast is brought to you by Be Micro, organic freeze-dried microgreens for easy, everyday nutrition. Sprinkle them on any meal and enjoy the benefits. Shop now and save with code STEVE15 at bemicro.farm.
What are your thoughts around the electricity with AI and the water and just how much resource is needed to make AI happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is what it is. I don't think there's like something, I don't know how much we can get around it. I am optimistic that we're seeing more and more development around more efficient AI models that don't use as much energy. And so like there was this idea, like, I don't know, it was around the time of maybe the inauguration or the election a couple months ago, where they were talking about like investing like $100 billion, or I don't know if it was $100 billion. It was some like ridiculous, like large sum of money into like building 1 million like data centers like throughout the US. And like ideally, like we can develop these systems so like we don't even need to do that quite as much. But I do think like it's just going to be hard to like stop any of this.
Oh yeah, it's not getting stopped. It's just like, how do we do it in a way that just also isn't bad for the environment?
Right. Yeah. And I think that's the balance. I mean, I think we just have to like invest more and more into energy, like renewable energy production, or nuclear, like is another one of those things where maybe a little controversial, but
not to me. I think
Right.
I think for a long time, many years ago, there was a lot of nuclear reactors that were like blowing up or melting down and things like that. But it's like, okay, there's been advancements. There's been like 100 years of advancements in the technology, and I don't think we've even built one new nuclear reactor in the U.S. in quite some time.
Right.
So it does have a kind of a bit of a bad name to it, but it
Right.
seems pretty great.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at France, like they know what they're doing. It's like most of I think it's the majority of their electricity is and I don't think they've ever had like I've never heard of a meltdown in France. And a lot of these newer technologies, like, one of the ones, I believe it's called a molten salt reactor. Like if it gets too hot, the reaction stops. If it gets too cold, the reaction stops. So you don't end up with these like runaway like chain reaction scenarios where like you get a meltdown and then you can't turn it off because it's just like going
out of control.
Right. And so like, yeah, I think we have to invest more and more in those. And I don't know, I mean, like, I think it's a little too simplistic to say like that energy production, like, and that humanity and like climate change and all of these factors like mean that we have to like do less and that we have to like pare down. Because if you look at like poverty, like globally, like it's the biggest correlation is going to be energy. Like what is the availability of energy in that area? Like the poorest areas, like they don't have much energy. And, so it's a little like, I think it's a little too hard to just say like, oh, we have to like not, humanity just has to like do less and like slow down and like all of these things. Sometimes
That's not what we do.
I just think first of all, I don't think it's like practical, and like it's not like politically like feasible to like tell people to do less. So like on one level, like if that is how it is, and like we end up just like like killing ourselves essentially like over the next couple 100 years, then I think that's how it'll go. But hopefully we can figure out like more energy systems that are just sustainable.
And it's nice to have the AI's help. It can help us figure that out.
Right. And that's kind of, I think, the biggest thing that we're seeing now is like, we have 3 full-time people in our company, 1 part-time, and we're able to do like quite a bit. And I think that the ability for a small team to do a lot is going to continue to skyrocket with the ability of AI systems to like automate a lot of these kind of processes where like the business owner or operators are, I think in like a year or 2 from now, mostly what they'll be doing is just like establishing the AI systems and telling them like what the process is for their company. And then the human maybe is like mostly involved in like sales.
That sounds great to me.
Yeah, like doing all the back end, like boring stuff.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time on that, and I love the sales. I love the marketing. I love the
Right.
connecting and innovating,
Right.
R&D.
Oh, exactly. I think that's like what most entrepreneurial people enjoy. And then, you know, like when you're still small and like you don't have the funds to be able to like hire all of these different like roles, you have to do a lot of it yourself. So if like AI agents can do a lot of it in a couple of years from now, then I think the barrier to becoming an entrepreneur like becomes incredibly low. And that's interesting. Like I think that's like a place where people would want to be, is like the ability to like control their own destiny. But it's also like, on the other hand, it's like, okay, well, if software is dead, and like it's like where's the value going to be if like you can't really make money on like, you know, I think it's going to be like physical things, regardless if that's like machines or like food. I think it'll be really interesting to see how things go.
Yeah, we're all going to need
on this
to eat
in like 5 years or 10 years.
Oh yeah, we could do that. We'll run it back in 5 years. You're invited back on. What I'd say, staying kind of on the AI in the future, you know, there's kind of two paths. There's one that's maybe like a little dystopian, and there's one that's like really optimistic. What's something that you believe to be true around AI and the future of it that maybe most people wouldn't agree with or know about?
No, that's a tough one. Yeah, I mean, I guess I would bring it back to the idea that it's going to allow almost anyone to like start their own business. And I think like when people are looking at it from the perspective of like they're just like an employee somewhere and it's going to take their job, and it's like that's like a negative thing. But on the flip side, like it'll allow you to like be very empowered in the sense that like your ability to like create something and bring it to the world is like so much higher than it would have been even like a few years ago. On the other side of that, to prepare for this, like, you know, your job, from my perspective, like your job's not going to be taken by AI. Your job's going to be taken by someone who uses AI and who's very good at it, who like understands like the
like
tools.
A competitor is going to take your...
Well, even if you're, I'm not talking about like a company necessarily, although I think it maybe also applies there, but I'm just talking about like if you're some sort of like knowledge worker, you work at a company and you design like marketing materials or whatever it is. That's something that like AI is getting pretty good at.
Yeah.
In terms of like doing the graphics.
Yeah, we see that with design work today. It's
exactly.
Like, holy cow. It's like you just say anything to ChatGPT and it'll make you something. Make me a logo, make me this photo, make me anything.
Right.
And now that integrates into Canva, that integrates into, it's like, holy cow, is that starting to really show up in the design world?
Right. So I think like the people who understand how to use those tools like effectively and like understand like the whole process behind it beyond just like generating the image or whatever it is, that's like, I think those people are going to be like extremely empowered. And so just learning those skills like now as it's starting to like come online is going to be important.
And what softwares are you optimistic about? I mean, I just keep saying ChatGPT. I haven't looked at anything else.
There's something called MCP servers, which is a stupid name because it's like overly technical, but it's called Model Context Protocol, and it's getting more and more traction. A lot of these like AI things, like they make big news for like a day, and then you look back like 2 months later, and like no one's talking about it, no one's using it, and they're like Manus AI, for example. It was like came out a couple months ago, and like I actually don't know about theirs in particular, but OpenAI had a similar project called Operator, where it basically like takes over a browser for you and like clicks and like does stuff like a human would in a computer. And it just doesn't work very well. But the MCP servers are basically allowing, like, you could be able to chat to like ChatGPT or any of the competitors, and you'd be able to say like send an email to like blah blah blah, and then set up a calendar and like create an event in the calendar, and invite them, and it's gonna be like tomorrow at 9 a.m. And all you had to do is like chat, right? And right now the models just like generate text, but what they're starting to be able to do is basically use these tools. And so MCP is just like a framework for the OpenAI's model to be able to be like, okay, I know in order to use Gmail, I have to like send this type of code to it. And in order to use the calendar, I have to do this. And so like, and you can, bring that out to like any other tools, like whatever you're tracking your so CRM or whatever.
So you can just chat into this chat box, and then it will start to execute.
Do things instead of just like giving you text or giving you an image. It'll actually like do like
go complete assignments for you.
Right.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
And you have.
That's why I'm so obsessed with this stuff, because there's like, I mean, you run a company, like, there's just like an endless checklist of things, and it's like a lot of them are small and relatively simple. And if I could get those off of my hands and then just like be able to like dig into like the deep work and the stuff that requires like real focus and like hours.
I'm feeling way under invested in this from our conversation. I'm grateful to know that. I'm like, hey, I'm just ChatGPT all the time. What other AI, anything, nothing. I try Grok sometimes, be like, hey, where is that at? But that's it. So you're saying this, start paying attention, working with this, what did you call it? MC2?
MCP servers.
MCP server. Is there one in particular, or is that the name of the brand?
It's not like a company. It's not, Anthropic is the company that created it. They make Claude, which is a competitor to OpenAI, but it's just a protocol. It's essentially like, the way I've heard people talk about it is it's a USB stick for the digital world. So like in the sense that USB can like plug into like a million different devices and it's compatible with all these things. It basically allows something like ChatGPT to use a tool. The tool could be your calendar, your email. It could be your CRM, like where you're capturing your customer data, like some sort of software used for marketing. Or it could connect to LinkedIn or into Instagram or into TikTok.
Yeah, I'll connect it into everything.
Right.
Let's go.
Exactly.
What I'm wondering is what brand or what website do I go to start doing this?
So I believe there's a handful that are starting to like do this as a service, because before, like, this has only been around since November, right? So stuff moves so fast. But in November, it was basically like you have to like do it on your own computer, and you have to like make a server for like oh, I want this to be able to like talk
not
to
happening.
like not something that like anyone who's not super technical is going to do. It's like not a good ask, but there's starting to be like services for this. One of them is Zapier, but they basically ZAPIER, I believe. And there's a number of others that are starting to come out where you'd be able to like connect this. And that one I think works with Claude right now, or Anthropic, which is basically like ChatGPT. But honestly, like, wait a few weeks. I'm sure OpenAI will have it soon.
So then I could just keep it all within OpenAI.
That's what I'm hoping.
And that's
I don't know. I don't know what they're doing. But like, what's that?
That's the operator function?
No, this theoretically would just be like within the chat.
Oh. Okay.
And you would just be able to like, I don't know if they're actually working on this, but their competitors are, so they're probably, right? I mean, that's just the nature of this. It's super competitive. But my understanding of how it would work is like you would, in this theoretical where OpenAI does it, you'd basically like go into your account and you'd say like add tools, and then you like Airtable, like that's what we use for our CRM, and then you would have like Slack. You'd be able to like send Slack messages, and then I don't know, email, calendar, etc. And you would basically then be able to like tell it like, hey, can you send an email to Jeff and tell him that I want to set up a meeting.
What risk do you see of being so reliant on AI? Because what I'm seeing is the first thing that I became very reliant on with just my phone was GPS. Mm-hmm. And I used to be able to drive most places. I didn't have a GPS. There was no GPS. Right. So I was like, maybe I was printing something out, like MapQuest instructions turn by turn. Yeah. If you miss a turn, you're just like, okay, now I gotta go ask somebody. I don't know where I'm at.
Try to backtrack.
Right. But now it's like I've just outsourced my ability to GPS. Yeah. To where now I'm practicing. I'm so aware of it. I'm like, oh, I'm going to just try to use my GPS as little as possible to try to bring that back. But now I use ChatGPT so much. I'm like, oh, I'm like outsourcing my thoughts. I'm like, I don't have to think as hard. Right. So like that muscle is starting to like just atrophy.
I think that's a risk. I think that's definitely a risk. I think it depends on how you want to like frame how you're thinking about it and how you're working with it. I think of it as like a teammate. So it's not only like this thing that like works and does things on my behalf, but it's also like, I think it's still important that from like a business strategy perspective, like you're still like thinking about it and you're challenging the ideas that it's coming up with and not just being like, oh yeah, this is like basically.
No, I think of it like a thought partner. Like, give me a bunch of good ideas for me to know about. Yeah, but so just being like, critical and thinking through all of that is like, it's just like, that's something that humans are still probably a lot better at, assuming we exercise that skill. Because you can just like do exactly what it says, and then you kind of lose
some of that ability to like think for yourself, or even just like write, because it's so good at writing that it's like, I don't know, I've ended up writing a lot of my, especially like shorter emails. I just ended up doing it myself because I found that like explaining how to do it and then like copy pasting it back in, and I end up having to change like 10 things anyway. And like it's just faster to do it myself still. But I do think in the future they'll have like some system where you can basically just be like, here's all the emails I've written in the last like 5 years, this is my style, like figure out how I do it, and then I could just talk to it and be like, hey, do this.
Can ChatGPT remember things now? Is that changed?
Yeah, it's getting better at that.
Yeah, because I'm like, because that was tough where I had to like restart every time.
Right.
But
It's
now
as if you were talking to like someone who like had no context of anything, and now it's getting to the point where it like kind of remembers most of your conversations, which is infinitely more useful, obviously.
Yeah, I'll write out an email myself and then I'll put it in the chat. I say just make it better,
Right.
And then do it fast.
Yeah.
I saw something where Sam Altman, CEO of OpenAI, ChatGPT, said that people are saying please and thank you like so much that it's actually costing the company like tens of millions of dollars.
Right, to process the tokens or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, I think where I burn the most energy is I just love going down rabbit holes of having it make me different photos.
Oh, sure.
And
And those can take a while too.
They take a while. I'm like, this thing is using a lot of power to make this,
Right.
but it's hilarious.
Right.
Yeah. Nice. Hey, well, I got a gift for you here.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah. So this is
I
something.
like these stickers, by the way, and the new logo is great.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, you knew me when I was Beyond Microgreens.
Right.
And then I knew you when you were
Urban Farms.
Urban Farms. Yeah. Nice. I think we both upgraded our names.
Yep.
Thank you. So that's a mix of the broccoli, radish, and red cabbage, freeze-dried, all grown in a really good way. But now we are USDA organic and regenerative organic certified
Oh, no way.
as well.
Tell me about the regenerative organic label. I've been hearing about that, but I don't know much about it.
Not a lot of people do know about it. It's a relatively new thing. You have to be USDA organic to qualify for regenerative organic. The regenerative movement was really, or this certification was started by Rodale Institute, who's a leader in regenerative organics, by, what's that soap company that Dr. Bronner, and by Patagonian Provisions.
Right.
Those three organizations came together and made like, here's what we think the standard for regenerative is. Regenerative is more of like working with nature versus how you were talking about GMO corn, where we got to spray tons of stuff on it. And it's just a giant miles and miles of just one thing. It's like, that is not natural at all. How do we work more with the nature? And the way to get certified for it, there's really three parts. It's like, how are you with like the cleanliness of the product, of course, and that's where like the USDA organic piece comes from. There's a whole animal piece to it as well. There's no animals like involved in my process or what I'm doing, but they want to know that there's like an animal equity, and then people. How are you treating the people, and how are you investing into like the systems and bettering the environment? Yeah, and so it's brand new. Maybe this certification's been around for 3 years. The very first year, there was like 20 companies signed up for it. Last year, there was maybe 100, and this year already there's, I think, 800.
No way.
So now it's starting to grow
It's
like
growing
really
exponentially.
fast. Yeah, and but most people don't know about it. But it's from my opinion, it's the highest standard that you can have for something.
That's great.
ROC, that's for short, and it's
Regenerative organic
certification.
Okay, yeah.
And what else to say about it? Yeah, not
I
easy
thought
to
it
get.
was funny that like Patagonia, like, you know, they make outdoor gear, jackets, like whatever. And then like I started seeing like on the shelf in some grocery stores, like they sell pasta now.
And canned fish, tinned fish, and
Right.
they got all types of
It's quite an interesting pivot, but I think it has like a lot more to do with like their mission and like the kind of environmental goals that they have as a company.
So it's the same way that you use fresh microgreens, put those on your egg, salad, sandwich, smoothie, whatever you want. You're very familiar because we were making this together for a little while, and enjoy.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Anything else that you want to share or let the people know about? Where can they find you? Where can they learn more about the potential of investing about your machines?
Yeah, we're at rootedrobotics.com. So ROOTED robotics. Yeah, and then we're on Instagram, we're on LinkedIn, and we're on YouTube. I mean, we don't regularly post on YouTube. We just kind of have videos about like our machines themselves. Instagram's probably the most active, but yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, Maximilian Knight. Our website has a form, so if you want to reach out and can't find me any other ways, then it's easy.
Beautiful.
Cool.
Thank you, Max.
Thanks,
Anything
Steven.
else you want to share?
I don't think so.
Okay. Any parting words of wisdom for those wannabe entrepreneurs that are coming into the space? I
don't know to what degree people actually like believe that like this can be like easy, but like fucking hard. Starting your own business is like brutal and it's hard, and I don't know. It's not, in some like very edge cases, it's like, oh, you like come up with an idea and like in a few months you raised like millions of dollars and it was great. Like, yeah, that's like not the reality.
That's
like
the
vast
Instagram
majority
reality.
Yeah, that's not reality. Like I've been doing this for, we started Urban Farms originally in 2021, and so I've been doing this a while, and now we're really like starting to get on our feet and get traction, but it's been tough, and like there's been many months where I didn't pay myself, or had to work side jobs or whatever it is, and it's a grind, and like be okay with that if it needs to be something that you care about and that you're willing to like suffer for, basically.
Yeah, you got to care about it. And who have going on this entrepreneurial path? Who have you become during it? For me, I'm like, oh, maybe one of the greatest values of this path is how it's grown me and who I become, and where I'm going with this path. Not so much on the things that I'm building, that's great, but more so on just who I'm becoming. And when I look back, in my final years, it's like, oh, I built some great things, but I think just hearing other people end of life speak, they're most proud of who they've become. And it's like, this is a tremendous like pressure cooker for strengthening oneself and really getting to know oneself.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, like learn so many infinite amounts of like skills and just understanding of like how things in the business world work. And I mean, yeah, and then to your point, I mean, like, I don't know, I believe a lot in like Stoic philosophy and just like doing like hard things for the sake of like doing them, like cold showers and whatever. There's plenty of that on social media. I don't need to get into that so much, but I think doing hard things is like the most rewarding. Like for me, like one of the good ways to distill a lot of what Stoic philosophy is about is like, life is going to be hard. If you're lazy, life is going to be hard. If you work hard, life is also going to be hard, but you get to choose like which hard when you're doing it yourself, right? And it's not just like if you're lazy and you don't work hard, like you're not going to feel fulfilled, and you're going to have different struggles that are maybe more mental and whatever. But if you're going hard and like pushing yourself and doing all these things that make you stronger, like that's obviously also hard, but it's you have that control over it, and that's like rewarding, and that makes life better.
Last question: what does self-care look like for you?
It's a lot of meditation. I've also hiking, walking, specifically like walking or hiking like without any like sort of headphones or like content or whatever, like because it's just like hard to like detach. I think anything like that. I mean, sure, like relaxing and spending time with friends and family and all of that too. But I think meditation is really powerful for me. And I don't even know if this would qualify as like self-care, but I like go swimming, and free diving is something I also started doing a little over a year ago. And
that definitely qualifies to me.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's like a spiritual thing. I mean, it's like it's like some super athlete. I don't go like as deep as some of these like crazy people, but where they go in like hundreds of feet deep on their own breath, and it's like, all right, cool. But that I find like great and fulfilling, or I don't know, spiritual about freediving is just like it forces you to like really like go into your own body and like just focus entirely on like what you're doing and where you are, because you're underwater and you're holding your breath, and there's a lot of things that like you can't be thinking about anything else because it just like forces you to be in the moment. And I think jujitsu does that in some ways as well, because if someone's like trying to strangle you, like that's like all you should think about. So, or if you're trying to figure out how to strangle them.
Thank you, Max. Appreciate it. Good connecting with you.
Yeah, you too. Good to see you.
Good to see you.